Hi guys, welcome to this video. This is going to be another back to basics breakdown video of some foundational poses in yoga. And today we're going to be working on the balancing postures. So Virabhadrasana 3, Warrior 3, Ardha Chandrasana, coming into that twisted half moon as well. So just giving you some tips and tricks on what to do when you're balancing on one leg. So for the first posture that I want to break down is Warrior 3. My favorite way to come into Warrior 3 is usually from a high lunge. The reason being is that a lot of times when we come into our Warrior 3, we tend to be kind of pushing off that back leg. We don't really find the stability in the left leg. So in high lunge, what I like to tell my students is bring your hands to heart center. Draw the shoulders up, back, and down so that you maintain the length in the spine. Another nice advantage of coming from high lunge is that your hips are already squared, which is something that you want to maintain in your Warrior 3. Now, shifting the body weight forward, coming into like an arrow posture where you have a straight line from the head to the back heel, instead of pushing yourself into your Warrior 3, which tends to throw off your hips, I want you to really focus on the strength of that left leg. So first and foremost, pressing down into your big toe for stability. It helps with your balance. Our body is shifted forward, and instead of pushing ourselves off, I just want you to start shifting the weight forward. So you come onto the top of that back toe, and then as you lift the leg, you gently start to straighten out through the left leg. Now, I'll be the first to admit that we all have one leg that's a little stronger than the other. I'm going to work with my left leg because that is my stronger leg. I have issues with minor scoliosis to the right side of my back. But in our Warrior 3, the number one thing that tends to happen that I would say is a big no is that the right hip lifts up. We all have a tendency to lift up through that right hip. Now our goal here is to try to square the hips off. So my first tip to you would be flex through your right heel, your right toe's pointing downwards. You want to almost bring your hands behind you. Notice how that right hip naturally lifts up, and then try to square the hip down as much as you can. Now that puts a lot of tension onto your left glute, and I know that people sometimes struggle with a bit of mobility in the legs. So my second tip is, if you find that your leg is down here rather than lift it up a little bit higher, see if you can bend into that left knee and then lift that right leg a little bit higher to find that straight line in the back. Now, another don't that seems to happen in Warrior 3 is as the leg comes down, our upper body also collapses, so we're somewhere here. You want to feel as if you're opening up through the chest, so it can help to take the hands behind your back in your Warrior 3 so that you keep that open heart, that open chest, and then maybe reach the arms back or the arms forward. One thing that I would stress, having come from back issues, is that if you do have lower back pain, it can be a lot of stress to reach your arms overhead. So remember that yoga is a personal practice. It's all about you. So adjust, modify postures so that they benefit you the most, so that you're not suffering when you're in the pose. So my personal preference in Warrior 3 is to keep the arms reaching back behind me. So I'm pressing firmly into my left big toe. I'm making sure that my right big toe is pointing down. My right heel is pushing back. My right hip is squaring off with the left. I am opening up through my heart space, so I'm not rounding out through the upper back, and lengthening through the crown of my head. Now, even just doing that for a moment and talking to you guys, I'm losing my breath. It's a tough posture. It's really hard to balance. It takes a lot of focus. But the more that you can build up your leg strength, especially the glute, because when we do a lot of these movements, we are focusing on our glutes to help stabilize our hips so that we don't wobble all over the place. That's pretty much it for Warrior 3. I would say be mindful of keeping that lift in the back leg, the squaring off in the hips, the opening in the chest, so that you look like you're creating a nice T shape rather than a rounded one. From Warrior 3, the next standing posture that we tend to do the most is Ardha Chandrasana. Now, Ardha Chandrasana, half moon pose for me, one of my favorite transitions would probably be from reverse warrior, warrior two, or extended side angle. Anywhere where you have the front knee bent, the back foot diagonally angled, and you're shifting your weight forward so that your left hand either reaches for the ground or a block. I don't have a block with me right now, but I would highly encourage most people that are new to their yoga practice to use a block in this pose. The reality is that our arms just aren't long enough. There's no shame in using things like blocks and bolsters to help your practice. It's so much more important for you to do it right, to build up the strength. So Ardha Chandrasana, your hands reaching forward, those of you that have the balance already would either hover the fingers off the ground or just keep the tops of your fingertips onto the floor. Now, one of the standard no's is that the right hip dips, that right foot is floppy, and we're just reaching our arm up to the sky, but our right shoulder is facing downwards. Now, Ardha Chandrasana, as much as I say that I like to come into it with that left knee bent, the alignment is very, very similar to triangle pose, to Trikonasana. So the left hip is tucking inwards, the right hip is opening up, that right foot is pointing sideways, you are pulling inwards, opening up through that right shoulder. Now, same thing, when you come into Ardha Chandrasana, you're pressing into the big toe, you're pulling that right hip in, you're opening up through the right hip, flexing your right toes as much as possible. Now, the more that you flex your right foot, the more stability you will find. It's as if you're kicking a wall behind you and then working on floating that right arm up to the sky, opening up through the right shoulder. So left shoulder is almost coming under and right shoulder is opening up. Once you have that strength in your Ardha Chandrasana, you can play with taking your gaze up towards the sky or hovering your fingertips off the ground. I'm going to try to show it now and probably fall. But once you have that stability, you can start to play with more balance. But notice as I do that, my toe starts to lift up off the floor, and I tend to lose a lot of that stability. But that's where you can make your practice a lot more playful. Now, Warrior 3, half moon pose, twisted half moon pose is another balancing posture. I won't lie, it's not one of my favorites, only because similar to Warrior 1, I find the alignment quite tricky, and I think a lot of us do when we come into it. But twisted half moon, your fingertips are on the ground or once again on a block, which I recommend because if you look, even when I'm coming into half moon pose, if my hand were on the floor, I am dipping downwards. We're trying to get a nice straight line from my head to my foot. And if your arms aren't long enough, if you don't have the ability to hover the fingers, then you're completely losing that alignment and shifting the body downwards. So in your half moon, find your block or fingertips to the ground. This time your hips are squaring off. So it's like you're coming back to that Warrior 3 alignment where you're pressing right toes to the ground, right heel reaching backwards, trying to drop that right hip. Sorry, not drop it too much, trying to keep the hips leveled as you open that left arm up towards the sky and find the twist through your midline. A lot of times we want to drop our hip so that we can find the twist a little deeper, and this actually reminds me a lot of our simple twist. So it's a very similar dynamic, but with more stability because we're on the ground. What happens is we drop the right hip down so that we can twist a little bit deeper, but when you do this, you've completely lost the twist. You're not really intensifying the twist in any way. Whereas if I try to bring that right hip up, I press firmly into my right hand, I draw the right shoulder under and reach that left arm up to the sky, I am getting a delicious spinal twist as I open up. Once again, I'm losing my breath, so I'll hone it back in. But those are the big tips that I would say for your standing postures is make sure that you really use your big toe to press into the ground on the standing leg to help with stability. Gaze is something that's incredibly important in yoga, your drishti. when you can focus on one point, it really helps with balance, with being able to stay on one foot. Whereas if we're looking around, that balance tends to go all over the place. Warrior 3, making sure that the hips are squared. Ardha Chandrasana, that the hips are open. And just really tuning into what your body is feeling in each and every posture. I think it's so important, and something that so many of us forget is the why behind each and every pose. Why are you doing the pose? What are you feeling? Does it feel good to you? What are you trying to achieve from the posture? Just sinking into postures, especially when they're so habitual to us. So our vinyasas, all the warriors, you know, we're doing them in almost every single class. And I think that repetitive nature actually keeps us away from being aware. I think it becomes so mundane that you're almost robotic. And it can be nice because you feel somewhat meditative, but you're not really focusing on how to build more strength at the same time as find more ease in each and every posture. And I think we should be always working on every single posture that we do, from easy to hard. Sometimes the easiest ones are the ones that we should be working on the most. So I hope that this was helpful in understanding essentially the alignment cues that I would be giving for things like Warrior 3, half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana, and twisted half moon. Those poses where you're coming onto one leg and balancing. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks.